train your gut. Like the next part of this tip, train your gut. And if you're doing 40 grams of carbs per hour, you're not going to be able to magically do 100 on race day if you don't
Right.
train that. Same way as if you only run 1 mile in your training, you can't just bust a marathon out and have a good time with that. When we were doing our training for Attila, we literally would take our long workouts, whether that's a 3 or 4 hour swim run, and we would try to execute our race plan on the targets that we had set. Welcome to the Low Tide Boyz SwimRun podcast. I'm Chip.
And I'm Chris, and this is episode 238 of the show. In this one, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to be talking about our top 5 swim run nutrition tips. This is for beginners and seasoned veterans alike. We get these questions all the time in our DMs, Chipper, and we're like, hey, you know what? Let's just put all of our best thinking into one show, because this is something that we actually think about all the time. And
we still are working and thinking and refining it as ourselves, as some might say, experienced swim runners. But yeah, race season's upon us. It has kicked off here in North America. So, people were having a not so awesome experience, AKA bonking their brains out. Been there, done that. And these tips will hopefully help you avoid that, or at least put yourself on a better plan in the future.
And I think you mentioned something, so we'll share some resources at the end of the show, but our real nutrition journey really started when we had Andy Blow on from Precision Fuel and Hydration on episode 25. So while this show is not sponsored content for PFH, I mean, it kind of is,
highly
because a lot of what we've learned and have implemented in training and in races, which has been transformative, I think it's safe to say. Basically, we wish we would have known this stuff like 10 years ago. It's just held true. So when people ask us, we can only tell them from our experience, and our experience is basically directly derived from what Andy told us.
And we're going to break it down into, easily digestible, no pun intended with the food related things. But if you like the Martin's gel, then insert the Martin's gel instead of the P Precision stuff. Test out what works for you, what works for Chris and I. Every body is different. Yeah. So,
and I actually think that leads to our first tip. So number one for us is you have to know your numbers, which means getting sweat tested, know your sweat rate, all that stuff. Then once you know that, you need to figure out what you need to do to compensate, whether you're a heavy, salty sweater, or you feel like you need a lot of calories to perform well. Then you got to train your gut, and then you need to practice that for race day. So it's sort of a combo of hey, you have to it's sort of like the knowledge is power tip. And for us, it's like I always thought I was a light sweater until I took a sweat test, and then I was like, oh, actually, I sweat a ton. I'm a very salty sweater, even though I wouldn't get sort of the salt cakey stuff.
Which I would get that a lot, and I think sort of the know your numbers is the good thing to do is kind of take a benchmark. So for your next, maybe your long run, or maybe your long run on the weekend, 90 minutes, 1 hour, whatever that will be. Don't do anything different. Just bring what you normally do and count and say, and we are the system, I guess, that we're looking at, that Chris and I optimize to, is grams of carbs per hour. So if you look on the nutrition label, everything will tell you how many carbs it has. And then you just say, hey, I had these 2 gels, or I had this Cliff Bar, or whatever. Count the grams up and how long duration was your thing. And that's your benchmark. And, I think what Chris and I found out when we started learning about nutrition and really thinking more about this was, severely we're underfueling ourselves. And then you wonder why, hey, I'm falling off in my training sessions, or I'm totally blasted after I need to lay on the couch for 2 hours.
Yeah, and we'll definitely get to that. Great foreshadowing on some of the extra tips there. But so I think one thing that's worth mentioning is, when we talk about sweat tests and sweat rate, nutrition and hydration are two sides of the same coin. Right? Obviously, you have to be properly hydrated, but you also need to take enough fuel. So, knowing your sweat rate, I know as Chipper, this is something you've done where you'll weigh yourself before or after a run, so kind of know how much, how much you're leaking, because you're a very heavy sweater. So it's helpful to know. It's you know what? For every hour of vigorous activity, I probably need, I don't know, minimum 400 cc's or whatever it is. So it's helpful to know. And that's why this first step, knowledge is power. If you don't know what's going on, you're like, oh, I just take a gel and I'm fine. you know what, there's a much better way to do this. And it's important for swim run because, there's a lot of heat, there's a lot of cold, there's a lot of things that are happening. So making sure that you're properly fueled and hydrated is really the key to having a good day.
Yep.
And
so, yeah, like have that benchmark of your numbers and train your gut. Like the next part of this tip, train your gut. And if you're doing 40 grams of carbs per hour, you're not going to be able to magically do 100 on race day if you don't train that. Same way as if you only run 1 mile in your training, you can't just bust a marathon out and have a good time with that. So kind of, when we were doing our training for Attila, we literally would take our long workouts, whether that's a 3 or 4 hour swim run, and we would try to execute our race plan on the targets that we had set. And so if you have no idea where to even start with your numbers, we'll send you over to precisionfuelandhydration.com's website. They have a nutrition planner. They can at least get you pointed kind of like in the right direction and on the right path. If you have no idea where to start, they have lots of great stuff to start there. But yeah, tip 1, knowledge is power. Know your numbers. Start kind of training and working up to that in every training session. I have adjusted my mentality. Every training session is an opportunity to practice good fueling. And to fuel and have a good, be hitting your numbers essentially.
Yeah. And this kind of dovetails into our second tip, which is proper fueling and training results in better recovery post-workout. So basically for every workout that I do, again, this is all based on advice and wisdom from the Precision Fuel and Hydration folks, anything that's over like 45 minutes, I'm at least taking 1 gel. Do I need a gel in 45 minutes? No. But if it's a hard workout, afterwards, I feel better. I have more energy. And for us as young dads, like, once the workout's over,
you're still on the clock, baby.
It's not like we can take a nap, right?
No, I want to, but we can't. And yeah, I mean, this was actually like a really pleasant surprise for me when I was like, I'm going to be really diligent and, I have my system and I know my numbers and I know my plan. And when I hit my plan, I would finish and I'm like, hey, I feel pretty good. Or I would get home, I would still be kind of energized and I wouldn't be, like drawn to the couch. So this is a really like a positive outcome from properly fueling. And I do notice that, if I, maybe I'm 30 minutes out from finishing the run, I can finish the run. I don't need a gel and I'll just finish and I won't have the gel, bad chipper, some lashes for myself. But I will notice I'm dragging a little bit there in the afternoon. And the next time I'm like, take that gel, even though you don't quite need it.
Yeah.
Boom. And your energy levels. So kind of think about it as like keeping your energy levels afloat as long as you're not making your body go like so deep in the well to finish your workout or your training.
Right. And I think similarly with hydration, you want to make sure that you're not just completely dehydrating yourself. So right after a workout, the other thing I do is immediately drink high salt, for me, high sodium electrolyte solution to basically replenish everything that's going on. And I just kind of go on with my day. I'm not like super thirsty all day. I'm not just sort of essentially, just peeing all the time because I'm drinking water. I'm actually replenishing right away. And then I'm good to go for the rest of the day. So again, this is all part of kind of like related to the first one, knowing your numbers, knowing what you need, and then experimenting to figure out what works for you. But we found, again, this is from the Precision Fuel and Hydration folks, that like proper fueling during training yields better recovery afterwards, and you can bounce back a lot quicker, which is, don't we all want to bounce back quicker?
It makes it all so much easier and so much more tolerable. So yeah, just nail your plan and you'll be off to the races.
Yeah. Which again, Chipper, you're just crushing the segues here.
Chris, thank you.
Because our third tip is develop a pre-race fueling plan. Now, we're talking day before, we're talking race morning. We'll talk about specific during race later. But again, this is another one where it was kind of a revelation to me. Like I do the same thing every single time before a race or a big workout. Like if I'm doing like a 3-hour trail run or we're doing like a 3-hour swim run, I'm treating it the same way.
Yeah, you're simulating the race experience essentially.
Yeah. So why don't Chipper, because I know we basically do the same thing.
We do.
And it seems to be working. So
so I mean,
let the people know what we do.
I'll inform the people now, Chris. Thank you. So, one thing we do know, and Andy Blow from PFH has shared, air travel is generally a dehydrating experience for you. You know, you're thrown off. You don't have your Stanley tumbler or hydro flask, whatever the situation is. And so you're generally dehydrated a little bit more. So the day before the race, always have a water bottle. We use the 1500 PFH, which is their highest concentration. It's not overly salty. You can definitely just put like some table salt and water and some lemon or whatever, mix that you want to do. But having that just to kind of make sure you're topped up the night before, and you're not drinking until you're peeing clear or anything. It's just, you're just kind of topping everything off, making sure everything's topped up.
Yeah, so night before race,
night before the race,
electrolyte solution. Again, what for us it's pretty nuanced because we've done the sweat test and stuff like that. But stronger than you probably think you need. So just to make sure when you come race morning, you're at least showing up on race day super topped off.
Yeah.
The other thing, which again is something we do religiously, is before the race we take a gel. That helps deal with sort of the energy spike or energy burn from being nervous before a race. It helps you just kind of make sure you're primed for the start. If you're a caffeine consumer,
present.
If you're a caffeine consumer, taking a caffeine gel before the race is probably a good idea. Given the half-life of caffeine,
Chris?
15 minutes is what we do and what we've been told. And pretty much we sync our watches to it, and we let each other know when we're going to take that first gel,
we do.
just to make sure we stay on top of it.
And rewinding a little bit before the race starts, that race morning. Again, this is obviously something that you have practiced out. Whether that, hey, I'm doing my big long run out on the trails today. Hey, I know specifically for me, oatmeal or a piece of toast with peanut butter and jam, like that's my jam. It works easy. I can get that at a store in Portland, Maine, or in Canada. Like I can just find these things. Oatmeal is very easy to carry with you. Chris has his, things that he likes as well. And then sort of when you're getting prepared or maybe heading to the race start, another bottle of
you just sip on,
just kind of sip on that. I use the 1500 just to kind of stay topped up for me. And then like 15 minutes before the race, that bottle of PFH is down the hatch, and 15 minutes before you're taking that gel. I take the caffeine gels and you just take the regular 30s there. But that really kind of starts, and how I think about it, that gel starts the clock for me of my plan, which my plan is every 20 minutes or roughly thereabouts, have some nutrition, have some fuel.
You're like Tolstoy here with the segues, I must say. So our next tip is really thinking about taking as much fuel as possible rather than taking the least. So this is really a mindset shift, and it was a mindset shift for us, which is just like, oh yeah, like you want to be like fat adapted and stuff like that. Well, guess what? All of the best athletes are living off of carbs and taking tons of carbs.
As much carbs as possible.
And so like you see world champions, they're doing like 90 grams, 110 grams of carbs per hour. So start thinking about in your training and your racing, it's the person who wins isn't the person who can take the fewest gels possible. The person who has the chance of win is the person who can consume as many gels as possible. So precision fuel and hydration, those folks recommend a minimum of 60 grams per hour, which is like at least 2 gels per hour based on their, some gels have like 35 grams. So you gotta check that out.
Do the math.
And again, we're not saying use whatever gel works for you. I've actually been diversifying my gel intake where I was exclusively a PFH guy. Now I take a GU caffeine gel that has like a, baby amount, like 20 milligrams, 20 or 30, because that's plenty for me, and I kind of want to keep it that way. So, but yeah, it's really just this mindset shift, which I think is like a big tip and a big unlock for people. It's just like, hey, as Oscar Olsen would say, take the fucking gel.
Take the fucking gel, man. And we've seen this play out in races where we have executed on this strategy that it was like, we just had, there's a gel on the table, grip and rip, and just slam that thing down. So you're not getting the full thing down, but it's something extra on top of what you're already doing. And that's only going to help. And this is like, it's going to help you if you have done that gut training. If you haven't done that gut training, who knows? It's the Wild West out there for your stomach, because it hasn't.
Sure.
It's like, well, what, we got 30 more grams coming down. I'm trying to deal with the 30 you put down 10 minutes ago.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you listen to the show, you've heard of, we've gotten like gelled out after 8-9 hours, which is, seems to be our limit,
Yeah.
which we're hopefully one day, bust through that barrier. But, in 2021, I think when we did Lake James, it was like about 40 minutes left in the race. We each had another gel and we
Yeah.
decided to forego it. And like that last 2 miles
Turned into a
was
slog.
bad. I mean, we were just trying not to trip or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think from that race, it's like, hey, if the race is going on, you take a gel, and it's just, again, trying to shift your mindset. It's just so helpful because, again, we're trying to have people have good swim run experiences, and what isn't a good experience? A 4-hour bonk.
I can confirm a 4-hour bonk is not an amazing experience. And just for reference points, and again, like whatever Chris and I's grams per hour doesn't mean that's what your grams per hour is, but we have trained up. I can pretty comfortably do 90 to 100 grams an hour of PFH gels or some other combination of gels an hour. But we've also been working on that for 2 years now of pretty much anything over 2 hours. Like those are kind of the numbers that I'm hitting at the like intensity. And you're right around there, right around the 90 mark as well.
Yeah, I try to stay between 80 and 90. If I'm just running, I tend to do less, but I try to at least do 60 when I'm running. But if I'm swim running, just because you're just burning so much more energy, trying to stay warm, everything that goes into thermogenesis and all that stuff, like you're burning more calories than you think. Same thing with sweat rate. Like you're probably sweating more than you think, just because you might feel cold in your suit, but that doesn't mean you're not sweating.
And this is going to be a bonus tip. So we always we try for top 5, but it ends up being 7. But because SwimRun is so varied, I actually have a timer on my watch. Every 20 minutes it beeps, and then Chris and I have I'll be like, I'll just hold it up, or I'll be like, I'm fueling. I'll tell him. Chris knows to fuel. He doesn't need my reminder, but it's just kind of a good mechanism that we have in place that's helpful. But because you might have a swim that might be 25 minutes and you're not able to take a gel in the middle of the swim. So that's why having a good sort of range of grams per hour is helpful, because you might be running, and yes, you can have a gel in a run, but then you might need to take your next gel in the middle of the swim. Then you're going to have to wait another 10 minutes. So topping up those carbs at the aid station is never really gonna like come back to bite you, because you're always gonna be in a deficit and you're always gonna need
for sure
the extra.
And I would say, like, throw another bonus tip. That's just like layer the bonus tips, is like really knowing your race. Like, what race are you doing? Where do you think you're gonna be? If there's a long swim coming up and your timer goes off and you take a gel, but this swim's gonna take you like half an hour, take another gel before the swim, and just like, it's not going to be upsetting your stomach too much while you're horizontal. So just make sure that like taking a bonus gel. Again, I thought we did that really well at Whistler a few weeks ago, where our plan was we're taking a gel every 20 minutes, but once we hit an aid station, we're definitely taking hydration, and there's a gel on the table. We're taking some of it, whether the whole thing, half of it, whatever, but at least just put something down. So there was probably an extra just bonus, maybe even like 150 grams of gel that we took sort of as just like a bonus. And, we're still here to talk about it. So we're okay. We made it.
We made it. And this is something to get really into the weeds that we actually will talk about during our sort of, we'll sit down and we'll have our kind of pre-race ritual that we do. We'll go over the course map, kind of talk through some strategy. And then we will note, hey, there's a, like Whistler, for example, what was that? Like a 1,600 meter swim. Okay, this is going to take us 20 minutes, 25 minutes. We specifically will discuss, maybe even mark down our paddles. Yeah, let's have a gel here. Or if you're playing with caffeine, hey, okay, I take mine in the beginning. Okay, this race is going to take us, 5 hours. Okay, I'm going to time my next one here. And you might write a little mark or circle or write caffeine or whatever you want on there. But, that we always emphasize this, the more you can plan out and not having to rely in real time on like, what decision should I make? If the decision's made for you on your paddles, you'll just be able to enjoy the experience a lot more.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Our last tip.
No segue for this one. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. It's okay. 4 out of 5 is pretty good.
I try.
So our last tip is, as my computer closes, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Now, we've seen it before. Like, you want to know what's on the course and make sure you have a plan B in case a plan A goes to shit, which happens. Sometimes the gel that you've been training with on race day is unpalatable. You can't feel like you're going to get pukey or whatever, you have to adapt. And adapting is not, well, I'm going to stop eating. Like adapting is, let me try something else at the aid station because you need the fuel, you need the carbs. The second you stop taking carbs, your race performance is going to decrease. You're getting likely to bonk. If you're not bonking, you're certainly slowing down. So you want to make sure that, again, with SwimRun, we've said this for years on the show, you really need to embrace the ambiguity. And some of that is making, having plan Bs when plan As don't work. Or, if there's a Coke or Pepsi or whatever thing at the aid station and you feel like that you got to hit the Coke, I mean, go for it. Like, it's like, oh, that's not a part of my plan, even though I'm bonking. It's like, no, let's solve the problem. So yeah, I think that's not advice that I think I would have received maybe even like 5 years ago. But now, I'm all about like, okay, plan B, plan C, plan D, let's just try anything because fueling is such an important part.
Yeah, and I'll even apply this a little bit differently as well. The same tip, variety is the spice of life, right? So like Chris and I said in Attila, we were just flogging ourselves with PFH gels for 7-8 hours, and we just hit a limit. There was just only so much PFH we could take. And we didn't really have a great plan B, to be honest with you, that first time. And we were like, oh, okay, on course, let's switch it up. But now we have kind of diversified the textures of gels. Like, for example, the Spring Energies, let's forget about the controversy with the carb contents of those for a second. But like, it's kind of more of like an applesauce, like a different mouthfeel on there. Or maybe you want to get a different flavored gel, or you like the blocks or waffles, or you like the real food on course. Like, mix in that stuff. If you know that you're going to get in a weird way with too much gels, or that you have gotten gelled out in the past, that's definitely something to think about as well, is like, how can you kind of diversify your nutrition experience to help make sure that you are optimizing towards being able to take the most in. And if that means having some gels, some, orange slices at the aid station and some Cliff blocks or whatever the situation is, then that's the good plan there. And that also gives you variety. If you got gelled out earlier than you expected, you can go to your other variety a little bit sooner, or, maybe your partner has a little variety, you can bum off them.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. Like Casco 2018, I was like, can I have your last gel, please? Like, yes, it was very kind of you to give me your last gel.
I mean, that was the least of my problems. That race.
It's like, I only brought 5 gels.
I was like, I'll give it to you, but my arms aren't functioning anymore. So you're going to have to.
I mean, it's like maturity. Like every period you look back, you realize how immature you were. Like in high school, you think you're so mature. Then you go to college, you realize what an idiot you were. It's like every race is like, oh my God, I was such an idiot. I made
so many mistakes.
Imagine only bringing like 5 gels for Casco. Ridiculous.
Shameful.
Ridiculous. Anyway, so those are 5 tips. And again, I think like the one tip to rule them all is really practice in training, practice in your kit, practice nutrition in your kit, do everything in your kit, practice fiddling around, put the gels where you're going to have them during the race. So you can, work on like getting them out of your back pocket or wherever you're going to keep them. What are you going to do with your trash? Have a plan for where you're going to put your gels during the race. Obviously, we don't want to litter. So one of the things I do, I have like a pocket in my kangaroo top, which is the trash pocket. So again, just having a plan for all this stuff can be really helpful. And the best way to do that is not on race day as you go along. Now, a couple of resources and episodes who can't, again, we started our journey, mentioned at the beginning of the show, episode 25 with Andy Blow, where he was just blowing our minds.
Oh my God.
Go back,
the game for us
go all the way back and listen to that one, because that's really what set us on our path. And they were cool enough to, send us to get sweat tested and stuff. So it was, justified a lot of nutrition stuff for us. Another episode with Andy Blow, especially if you're doing Attila, is our Countdown to Attila show, where half of the show, this is episode 118, where he talks about sort of fueling for the World Championship. And we might do a separate show on that in particular, because that show now is a few years old, to see if there's any new science or whatever. But again, you're doing a super long race, that'd be one to check out just to hear it from the expert himself.
Yeah, he's done it multiple times there. And you can always head to Precision Fuel and Hydration's website. They have a planner there. It actually has SwimRun events. So I use this. I was doing a 50K and I'm like, I don't even know what I should do. And you can plan it in there. So you put the type of event that you do. They know what swim runs are. So bonus cool points for PFH there. But you put in the distance, what type of sport, and then generally like, are you a heavy, medium, or light sweater? And like, how much do you like your sweat rate, high, medium, low? So you don't need to have like specific this many milliliters per whatever unit of measurement they use. And they'll recommend a general carb strategy for you. Obviously with their products, you can take that and you could apply it to whatever gels or whatever products that you like, but it will give you generally the recommended grams per hour. And it at least is a great place to start. And then you test that and you kind of learn and adjust to what works for you.
Yeah.
And a bonus pro tip, what I do as well. So now this is 8 top tips. Every long run where I'm practicing my fueling, in my Strava notes, I will actually write how many carbs I had and then how much fluid I had as well. And, you could like rate how you felt or like all that sort of stuff. So that's just one more area that I'm like kind of like keeping track and accounting for how much I'm taking to kind of track my progress through that as well. So
yeah, super.
And lastly, if you are inspired to try some PFH as well, use the code Low Tide 24. You can save 15% off your order over there. There'll also be a link in the show notes.
Yeah, that'll take you right there.
So yeah, we really love their products. Use them regularly for all the races. They also sponsor all the US Atala series events, so you'll get that on course.
Which really feels like, it's funny. I mean, we were talking about this, I think, before Whistler, how
it's like
it's like a home race.
Yeah.
Like it's a home race when we know they're gonna have like the products that we.
But I mean, if you're doing Atala, I mean, last year Atala had like Martin's, and they have some other brand that's doing it now. But obviously go out and buy that if you want to test it out, or at least kind of like look to understand, hey, does this have 20 carbs or 30 or 40? Like, where does this fit for my plan? And that will help you basically adjust to what's going to be on course. But yeah, those are the tips.
Yeah. So 5 plus 3, pretty good.
8 tips.
Pretty good.
We, it wasn't 10.
Probably could be. I'm sure we could come up with a couple more.
Should we do 10?
Should we do 10?
I don't know. Do we have
Man, oh yeah. Here's another tip. If you don't like the products that they're gonna have at the table for hydration, bring salt tabs. Practice using salt tabs. That's a great way to supplement, making sure you stay topped up on your electrolytes. If you're a heavy sweater in particular, I know, Chipper, you've tried to be really good about making sure that you're supplementing.
Yeah.
Again, for a home race, it's okay because they'll have PFH as a hydration solution. But even with that, I think you popped. And even if it's a placebo, it's a good one.
If it works, and again, like the race just becomes so familiar because literally my big training days every week, I'm literally doing the same exact thing. So a swim run is just no different. It just turns into the same thing there. And I'll add one more tip.
Ooh, okay. Tip number 10.
Okay, tip number 10.
Double the amount of tips, people.
Twice the amount of tips for the same cost.
Which is free.
Don't forget 5 stars on iTunes and Spotify. Subscribe on Patreon or whatever. Thumbs up on YouTube. For the soft flask, if you bring a flask for these long ones, and Andy Blow, this is a pro tip he gave. You take the flask empty. You don't have anything in it. You open, whatever electrolyte solution you like, in this case, PFH. You roll that thing up.
Yeah, pre-fill.
And you save it. You put it in your back pocket in the back of your little ARC suit, and you save it for when you're going to need it the most because you planned ahead. And like Whistler, I knew, hey, we got 10 miles of business on the back end of this race. I'm going to have to pop this bad boy at some point during these. I don't want to blow up there. So I filled it up before and I swam with it and ran with it. And I had it there and it was preloaded with the mix that I already know works. And it rolls up very nicely. And I just had the bottle there. Now, refilling it at future aid stations, we did miss that this time.
Well, yeah.
But, lessons learned.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Especially for Atala, for some of those long runs, having a couple soft flasks ready to go. In fact, for Atala, I had like a flask I was willing to toss.
Yeah.
At an aid station and a proper trash receptacle. Just to have 2 ready to go with the stuff that I know is going to work for me. So yeah, Dude, we did it. 10
Did
tips,
it.
man.
10 tips. Nice job. No more tips.
No more tips.
Come back next week. We'll see you out there.
That's it for this week's episode. Thanks so much for listening to the show. Make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave a rating or review, since that's the best way to help other people discover the show and the sport of swim run.
Check out our website, lowtideboys.com. That's boys with a Z, for swimrun resources, including gear guides, tips, how-to videos, and so much more. Make sure to check out our meme page at The Low Tide Boys on Instagram. If you have any questions or suggestions for the show, send us a DM or email us at lowtideboys@gmail.com.
We'd like to thank Riding Easy Records for our show music, and of course our wives for their support and tolerance of our swim run and other activities.
Lots of activities.
Lots of activities.
Finally, you can support our efforts on Patreon. Until next time, get out there and go for a swim.
Then a run,
And then a swim,
then another run,
then another swim.
then run some more.
Just keep going.
Let's go.
And then stop at some point because,
And fuel. Don't forget to fuel.
Gotta fuel
Of
too.
course, yes.